Ethan Richards stood in the lavish penthouse suite of his hotel, gazing out the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed a dazzling view of the city skyline. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden hue over the urban landscape below, but Ethan felt no warmth from the sight. The plush furniture, the expensive artwork, and the exquisite decor all surrounded him like a gilded cage, a testament to his success that felt increasingly hollow. He adjusted his tailored suit, the fabric smooth against his skin, yet it did little to soothe the unease that gnawed at him. With a sigh, Ethan turned away from the window and stepped onto the plush carpet that muffled his footsteps. The lobby below was alive with activity. Guests checked in, bellhops rushed with luggage, and waitstaff carried trays laden with drinks and hors d'oeuvres. He watched them, noting the exhaustion etched on their faces, the way their shoulders slumped as they navigated through the throngs of visitors. They were the lifeblood of his empire, yet he felt more like a distant overseer than a leader. "Ethan?" A voice broke through his reverie. It was Sarah, his efficient assistant, clad in a crisp blouse and pencil skirt that emphasized her no-nonsense attitude. "We're about to start the meeting." "Right," he replied, forcing a smile that felt too tight on his face. "Let's get it over with." As they made their way to the conference room, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of disconnection. He had built this hotel, this brand, from the ground up, but what had it cost him? He had sacrificed time, relationships, and perhaps even his own happiness. He pushed the thought aside. Today was about profits and growth, not introspection. The conference room was sleek and modern, with a long glass table reflecting the harsh overhead lights. The board members were already seated, their expressions a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Ethan took his place at the head of the table, surveying the faces of those who had dedicated their careers to his vision. "Let's get started," he said, his voice steady. "Sarah, please present the latest report." Sarah stood, flipping through her notes. "As you can see, our employee turnover has significantly increased this quarter. There are growing concerns regarding job satisfaction, especially among the frontline staff. Many have cited long hours and inadequate support." Ethan felt a flicker of irritation. "We're still turning a profit, aren't we? Isn't that what matters?" "Profitability is important, Ethan," Sarah pressed, her tone firm. "But if we don't address these issues, we risk losing our most valuable assets, our employees. Happy employees lead to happy guests." He frowned, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. "It's all about the bottom line. We can't let emotions derail our success." The room fell silent, tension crackling in the air. Sarah's gaze hardened, but she held her ground. "But what happens when the bottom line erodes because we neglected our team? We need to invest in our staff, not just financially, but emotionally. They are the face of this hotel." Ethan shifted in his seat, the weight of her words pressing against him. He had always prioritized profits, viewing his employees as cogs in a well-oiled machine. But as he looked around the table, he sensed an undercurrent of discontent among his colleagues. They were beginning to question his leadership. "Let's focus on the revenue projections for next quarter," he said, attempting to steer the conversation back on track. "We can't afford to lose sight of our goals." The meeting trudged on, a blur of numbers and projections that felt increasingly distant from the reality unfolding just outside the conference room doors. As the final report was delivered, Ethan dismissed everyone with a wave of his hand, his mind swirling with unease. "Ethan," Sarah called, stopping him as he rose to leave. "Can we talk for a moment?" "Make it quick. I know you're busy, but I'm worried," she interrupted, her voice low but urgent. "The staff is hurting, and it's not just about money. They need to feel valued, seen. You need to see them." He met her gaze, a flicker of frustration igniting within him. "I appreciate your concern, Sarah, but I can't let emotions cloud my judgment. This is business." "Business isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet," she replied, her eyes piercing through his defenses. "It's about people. If you don't start caring about your employees, you might find yourself standing alone at the top one day." Ethan felt a wave of irritation wash over him. He opened his mouth to retort, but stopped short, recognizing the truth buried in her words. Instead, he turned and left the room, his thoughts churning. As he walked through the hotel, the hustle and bustle of the lobby enveloped him once more. People moved around him, caught up in their own worlds, yet Ethan felt like an outsider. He spotted a young waitress balancing a tray of drinks, her brow furrowed in concentration. A fleeting thought crossed his mind. Was she happy? Did she feel fulfilled in her work? He continued through the lobby until he reached the quiet solitude of the terrace where the city stretched out before him. It was a beautiful sight, but the beauty felt tainted by the nagging sense of something missing. Just then, a familiar voice broke through his contemplation. "Dad?" It was Lily, his estranged daughter, standing at the entrance to the terrace. Her arms were crossed and her expression was a mix of defiance and hurt. "Lily," he said, caught off guard. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk, but it seems you're too busy for that," she shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're always too busy." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. "I'm trying to build a future for us, for our family." "A future built on money and success? Is that really what you think matters?" she challenged, stepping closer, her eyes blazing. "You're so obsessed with wealth that you've forgotten what's important. You've forgotten me." "That's not true," Ethan snapped, the frustration boiling over. "I work hard so you can have everything you need. You should be grateful." "Grateful?" she echoed incredulously. "For what? For a father who doesn't know me? For a life where I'm just an afterthought? You think money can replace love?" "Lily, He tried to reason with her, but she cut him off. "You don't get it, do you? You're lost in your own world, and you don't even see the damage it's causing." Her voice trembled with emotion. "I can't keep doing this. I'm done." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving Ethan standing alone on the terrace, her words echoing in his mind like a haunting refrain. Guilt washed over him, heavy and suffocating. He had always prioritized his work, believing that success would ultimately lead to happiness for his family. But in that moment, he realized just how wrong he had been. As he stood there, the weight of his daughter's disdain pressing down on him, a radical thought began to take shape in his mind. Perhaps the only way to truly understand his staff, to connect with his daughter, was to step outside his gilded world and experience life from their perspective. The idea grew stronger, igniting a sense of purpose within him. "I'll do it," he murmured to himself, the determination hardening in his chest. "I'll go undercover. I'll be a waiter." And with that, Ethan Richards, the hotel magnate, took the first step toward a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, family, and the true cost of ambition. Ethan Richards stood in front of the mirror in the staff locker room, adjusting the black bow tie around his neck. The crisp white shirt clung to his skin, and the black vest felt foreign against his body, a stark contrast to the tailored suits he was accustomed to wearing. He felt a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, nervousness, and a tinge of fear. This was his hotel, a symbol of his success, but today he would step into the shoes of the very people he had long overlooked. He took a deep breath, straightened his posture, and stepped out into the bustling energy of the hotel lobby. The moment Ethan stepped into the main hall, he was struck by the vibrant chaos that unfolded before him. Guests chatted animatedly, their laughter echoing against the marble walls. while staff members hurried about, balancing trays laden with drinks and hors d'oeuvres. The scent of gourmet dishes wafted through the air, tantalizing his senses. It was a far cry from the sterile environment of his penthouse office, where numbers and profit margins dominated his thoughts. "Hey, you!" a voice called out, snapping him back to reality. Ethan turned to see Carlos, a kind-eyed waiter with an easy smile rushing toward him. Carlos was one of the many faces Ethan had seen darting around the hotel for years, but had never properly acknowledged. "You're new here, right? I haven't seen you before." Ethan nodded, suddenly aware of how out of place he felt in his own establishment. "Yeah, I'm just filling in for a bit," he replied, forcing a smile. "I'm Ethan." "Carlos," the waiter said, extending his hand. "Welcome to the team. It can get hectic, but we're all in this together." Ethan shook Carlos's hand, appreciating the warmth in his grip. "Thanks, I'm looking forward to it." "Great, just stick close to me and I'll show you the ropes. We've got a big dinner service tonight, so it'll be a good way to get your feet wet." Carlos gestured toward the dining area, where tables were being set with meticulous care. Ethan followed him, feeling a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. As they wove through the sea of guests, Carlos shared snippets of his life with Ethan. "I've been working here for 5 years now," he said, his voice steady despite the fast pace. "It's tough, but I do it for my family. They rely on me." Ethan couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt wash over him. Here was a man, dedicated and hard-working, sacrificing his time and energy for loved ones, while he himself had been blind to the struggles of those who made his success possible. "What's it like?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. "Working here, I mean?" Carlos shrugged slightly, a shadow passing over his face. "It can be rewarding, but it's not easy. Sometimes it feels like we're just cogs in a machine. Management rarely acknowledges the hard work we put in. It can be disheartening." Ethan's heart sank as he heard those words. He had been so focused on the bottom line that he had forgotten the very people who contributed to it. "I didn't realize it was like that," he admitted, feeling the weight of his ignorance. Their conversation was interrupted by a flurry of activity as guests began to fill the dining area. Carlos quickly fell into his rhythm, expertly maneuvering through the crowd, taking orders and delivering drinks. Ethan struggled to keep pace, but he was determined to learn. "Just remember, keep your head up and smile," Carlos advised, glancing back at Ethan. "Guests can sense when you're nervous. Confidence goes a long way." Ethan nodded, trying to absorb the advice. He watched Carlos interact with the guests, his charm, his attentiveness, the way he made each person feel valued. It was a stark contrast to how he had approached his own role as a businessman. He had been so consumed with numbers and profits that he had lost sight of the human element. As the night progressed, Ethan found himself moving from table to table, serving drinks and clearing plates. He couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, but with each passing moment, he felt a flicker of connection with the staff around him. He noticed the camaraderie among the waiters, the playful banter that lightened the stress of the busy service. It was a world he had never fully appreciated. Then, in a rare moment of calm, Ethan overheard a conversation from a nearby table. A group of guests was discussing the hotel's history, sharing anecdotes that made Ethan's stomach turn. "Did you know this place was built on a series of questionable deals?" one guest remarked, his voice dripping with intrigue. "I heard it was all about connections and a few shady backers." Ethan's ears perked up. He had always known that his family's rise to wealth was not without controversy, but he had never paid much attention to the details. He leaned closer, pretending to refill a glass, straining to hear more. "Yeah, I heard that Ethan Richards, the current owner, had no idea how deep his family's ties go," another guest chimed in. "It's all very hush-hush, But you know how these wealthy families operate. They'll do anything for success." Ethan's heart raced as he processed their words. He had always believed that hard work and determination were the cornerstones of his success. The whispers of his family's past began to echo in his mind, filling him with a sense of dread. What if the stories were true? What if the very foundation of his empire was built on secrets and compromises he had been blissfully ignorant of? "Are you all right?" Carlos's voice broke through his thoughts, concern etched on his face. Ethan nodded, trying to shake off the unease. "Yeah, just thinking about everything. It's a lot to take in." "Trust me, it always is," Carlos replied, his expression softening. "But in the end, it's about how we treat each other, you know? That's what matters most." In that moment, standing amidst the clamor of the dinner service, Ethan realized how far removed he had been from the very essence of his business, the people. The employees who dedicated their lives to making the hotel a success, the families that relied on their jobs, and the guests who sought refuge in the luxury he provided. He had allowed ambition to overshadow empathy, and now, in this unfamiliar role, he was beginning to see the consequences of that neglect. As the night wore on, he poured himself into the work, serving drinks with renewed vigor, engaging with guests, and learning from Carlos. Each interaction brought him a little closer to understanding the lives of his employees. He heard snippets of their stories, their dreams, and their struggles, and with each tale, a flicker of compassion ignited within him. But as he cleaned up after the last table, Ethan could not shake the feeling that the night had only scratched the surface of what lay beneath the polished veneer of his hotel. The laughter and smiles of the guests masked a deeper truth, one that he was now determined to uncover. With a heavy heart, Ethan made his way back to the locker room, his mind racing with a newfound sense of purpose. The facade of success he had built was crumbling, and as he stood there, staring at his reflection in the mirror, he realized that the journey ahead would not be easy. But if he wanted to truly understand his hotel, his employees, and himself, he had to confront the uncomfortable truths that loomed in the shadows. And so, with resolve burning in his chest, Ethan Richards prepared himself for whatever revelations awaited him in the days to come. Ethan stood in the bustling dining area of his hotel, the clinking of silverware and the soft murmur of conversations surrounding him. The aroma of gourmet dishes wafted through the air, a stark contrast to the unease brewing within him as he processed Carlos's revelations about the hotel's past. He leaned against a wall, partially hidden from view, watching as the staff moved with practiced precision, their faces painted with a mix of determination and exhaustion. "Hey, Ethan," Carlos called, catching him off guard. "You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." His tone was light, but Ethan could sense the underlying concern in his voice. Ethan straightened up, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just deep in thought. This place has a lot of history, doesn't it?" Carlos nodded, wiping his brow with a napkin, clearly having just finished a particularly busy table. "You have no idea. A lot of us have been here for years, watching things change, but not always for the better." He glanced around before leaning in closer. "People feel undervalued, you know, like we're just cogs in a machine." Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of Carlos's words pressing down on him. "What do you mean?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Is it the pay? The hours?" "It's more than that," Carlos replied, his gaze steady. "We work hard, and we're often treated like we don't matter. I've seen good people pushed aside because they didn't fit a certain mold. It's disheartening." Ethan took a step back, the realization hitting him like a ton of bricks. "I had no idea. I mean, I knew there were issues, but—" He trailed off, searching for the right words, but they eluded him. Carlos smiled softly, an understanding in his eyes. It's easy to get lost in the numbers and profits when you're sitting up there in that penthouse. But down here, he gestured around the dining room, it's different. We're the ones who keep this hotel running. Without us, it's just a building. I want to understand, Ethan said, feeling a determination swell within him. What else don't I know? Before Carlos could respond, a sharp voice broke through the camaraderie. Get back to work, you two! We need this table cleared! Barked Janelle, one of the floor managers, her arms crossed and her expression a mixture of impatience and authority. Yes, ma'am, Carlos replied, a hint of sarcasm in his tone. He turned back to Ethan, his eyes sparkling with mischief. I'll catch you later, all right? We can chat more. Ethan nodded, watching Carlos dart off to comply with the manager's order. As he turned back to the dining area, he noticed a commotion at one of the tables. A young waitress named Melissa stood, her hands on her hips, facing Janelle. Listen, I just wanted to clarify the schedule. It's not fair to keep changing it last minute, Melissa argued, her voice rising above the din. The tension was palpable as other waitstaff paused to watch the confrontation. Janelle's face flushed with anger. You think this is a game? You're lucky to have a job. If you can't handle it, maybe you shouldn't be here. The words hung heavy in the air, and Ethan felt a surge of sympathy for Melissa. He stepped closer, unable to simply stand by. Excuse me, he interjected, surprising both women. Is everything all right here? Janelle turned her gaze sharply towards him, her expression shifting from annoyance to something more guarded. Just a minor disagreement, sir. Nothing for you to worry about. Ethan's brow furrowed. It seems like more than that. I think we should address it openly. Melissa looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. No buts, he said, surprising himself with his own assertiveness. What you're feeling matters. We should foster an environment where everyone feels heard. Janelle scoffed, but Ethan's steady gaze silenced her. Speak freely, Melissa. What's bothering you? The waitress hesitated, glancing at Janelle, who was now clenching her jaw. It's just, the schedule changes make it really hard for me to manage my family's needs. I can't keep working like this without a little stability. Ethan nodded, fully aware of the sacrifices many of his employees made. I understand. I'll make sure to review the scheduling policies. We need to do better. Janelle's eyes flared with indignation, but before she could retort, Ethan turned his attention back to Melissa. You're doing a great job. Thank you for speaking up. Your voice matters here. As Melissa's posture relaxed, Ethan felt a surge of pride. Perhaps he could make a difference, even in small ways. But the moment was fleeting as Janelle shot him a warning glare before storming away. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension. He glanced around the room, taking in the weary faces of the staff. Was this what he had built? A toxic environment where employees were afraid to speak their minds? With a renewed sense of purpose, he returned to serving the guests. As the night wore on, he stopped at a table where a couple was celebrating their anniversary. They were engrossed in each other, laughter spilling from their lips like music. Happy anniversary, he said, genuine warmth in his voice. The woman beamed at him. Thank you. It's our 5th year. Can you believe it? Her husband smiled, squeezing her hand. It's been a wild ride, but every moment has been worth it. Ethan felt a pang of envy at their connection, a stark contrast to his own fractured relationship with Lily. What's the secret? He asked, his curiosity piqued. Communication, the woman replied without hesitation. We talk about everything, even the tough stuff. It's not always easy, but we make it work. Ethan nodded, absorbing her words. I wish I'd learned that sooner. Don't dwell on the past, the husband chimed in, his tone encouraging. Focus on the present. Every day is a chance to make things right. Wise advice, Ethan murmured, wishing he could apply it to his own life. The couple's love was palpable, their appreciation for the little moments evident in the way they interacted. As he poured their wine, he couldn't help but feel a deep longing for that kind of connection. "Enjoy your evening, and thank you for choosing our hotel," he said, retreating with a smile. As he moved away, he couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider in his own establishment. Despite the wealth he had amassed, the joy he witnessed at that table was something he had yet to experience in his own life. The night continued, each encounter revealing more about the struggles and triumphs of his employees. With every conversation, Ethan felt the walls he had built around himself starting to crumble. He was beginning to see the reality of his hotel from a different perspective, one that was filled with both heartache and hope. As his shift neared its end, Ethan settled into a quiet corner, reflecting on the events of the night. He realized that his journey was just beginning, and if he wanted to make a real difference, he would have to confront his own shortcomings, both as a businessman and as a father. Ethan Richards leaned against the cool marble wall of a secluded corridor, the steady hum of the bustling hotel fading behind him. He had just finished his shift, his white shirt wrinkled and stained with remnants of the evening service, but it was the emotional weight he carried that felt heavier than any physical burden. As he stared into the distance, his mind raced with reflections on the day's events. The laughter and chatter of guests, the frantic energy of the staff, and the stories shared over simple meals had painted a vivid picture of life in the hotel that he had never truly seen before. He closed his eyes, letting the moments from the day wash over him. He thought of Carlos, the waiter who had shared his struggles with such raw honesty. The way Carlos had spoken about his family, his dreams, and the sacrifices he made each day to provide for them struck a chord deep within Ethan. He had always considered his employees as mere cogs in a machine, but today he realized they were individuals with hopes and fears, each faced with challenges he had never cared to comprehend. "Ethan?" A voice broke through his reverie. It was Sarah, his assistant, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you all right?" He opened his eyes, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his heart. "Just thinking," he replied, shifting his posture to project some semblance of confidence. "It's been a long day." "Are you sure you're okay? You've been acting different lately." She crossed her arms, studying him with a mix of curiosity and concern. Ethan hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "I guess I'm just realizing how disconnected I've become," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's so much more to this place than just profits and luxury." Sarah nodded slowly, her expression softening. "It's good that you're recognizing that. The staff really do look up to you, Ethan. If you want to make a change, now's your chance." He straightened, feeling a spark of determination igniting within him. "You're right. I want to do something meaningful, something that makes a real difference." As they spoke, laughter echoed from the dining room, drawing Ethan's attention. He thought of the couples celebrating milestones, the families gathering for reunions, and the employees tirelessly working to ensure every guest felt special. Yet beneath the surface, he sensed a growing tension, an unspoken fear that lingered in the air. The next day, Ethan returned to the hotel, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and trepidation. He donned the waiter's uniform once more, feeling the fabric settle against his skin like a second skin. This time, he was determined to not just observe, but to engage, to listen and understand. As he moved through the dining area, serving tables and interacting with guests, he overheard snippets of conversation that sent a chill down his spine. "I heard they're planning layoffs," a woman whispered to her companion, her voice tinged with anxiety. "Can you believe it?" They've been cutting back on staff for months now. Ethan's stomach dropped. He pushed aside a tray of empty glasses, his hands suddenly clammy. Layoffs? The very idea sent waves of dread washing over him. His mind raced back to the conversation he had overheard yesterday, the tension in the air becoming palpable. He couldn't ignore the implications of what he was hearing. "Excuse me, can I get you anything else?" he asked, forcing a smile at a table filled with laughter, trying to mask the turmoil brewing inside him. "Just the check, please," a man replied, oblivious to the weight of Ethan's thoughts. Ethan scribbled the order, his hand shaking slightly as he tried to focus on the task at hand. But the rumors of layoffs echoed in his mind, drowning out the laughter and clinking of glasses around him. After the lunch rush, Ethan found himself in the break room with a couple of employees. They were chatting over coffee, their voices low and filled with concern. "I can't believe they would actually let people go," one of the waitresses said, her brow furrowed. "What about our families? We rely on this job." "I know," another replied, shaking his head. "It's not fair. They act like we're just numbers on a spreadsheet." Ethan's heart raced as he listened. He wanted to speak up, to reassure them that he understood their fears, but the words caught in his throat. What could he say that would make a difference? Just as he was about to leave the break room, he overheard a familiar voice. It was Carlos. "I'm worried about my children," he said, his voice strained. "If I lose this job, I don't know how I'm going to provide for them." Ethan's heart sank. He felt a surge of empathy for Carlos, who had shared so much about his family. What kind of leader was he if he had allowed the business to reach this breaking point? "Carlos," he said, stepping into the room, his voice firm yet gentle. "I'm here for you. I want to understand what's going on and how we can address these concerns together." The room fell silent, eyes turning toward him, a mix of surprise and skepticism etched on their faces. "Who are you to say that?" one of the waitresses shot back, her tone defensive. "You're just a waiter like the rest of us." Ethan felt the sting of her words. "I may be dressed like one today, but I'm also the owner of this hotel," he replied, his voice steady. "And I want to ensure that everyone here is treated with respect and fairness." The tension in the room shifted, uncertainty hanging thick in the air. "Why should we trust you?" Carlos asked, his voice low yet resolute. "You've never cared about us before." Ethan sighed, the weight of regret heavy on his shoulders. "You're right. I haven't. But I'm here now, and I want to change that. I want to listen to your concerns and work together to create a better environment for everyone." As he spoke, Ethan felt a flicker of hope, a possibility of connection that had eluded him for so long. But just as quickly, that hope was overshadowed by a growing sense of dread about the rumors of layoffs. He excused himself, stepping back into the bustling lobby. The air felt charged with uncertainty, and he could see the worry etched on the faces of his employees. He wanted to be a force for good, to inspire change. But how could he do that when he felt so powerless against the looming threat of layoffs? As he moved through the hotel, his mind swirled with thoughts of his family's legacy, the sacrifices made to build this empire, and the weight of responsibility he carried. He had focused so much on success and profits that he had lost sight of what truly mattered, the people who made everything possible. He lingered near the entrance of the hotel, watching guests come and go, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to the weight pressing down on his heart. He had a choice to make, a path to forge. But as the day wore on, the shadows of uncertainty loomed larger, and he felt the walls closing in. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. He needed to act, to confront the challenges ahead, but the fear of what he might discover about his family, his business, and himself was a looming specter he could no longer ignore. The echoes of the conversations he had overheard haunted him, each word a reminder of the fragility of the lives intertwined with his own. As he stood at the threshold of the hotel, contemplating his next move, he felt an unsettling sense of urgency. The future was uncertain, and the decisions he made in the coming days would have far-reaching consequences, not just for himself, but for all those who depended on him. Ethan stood behind the polished mahogany counter in the hotel's back office, the air thick with tension. He could hear the clattering of dishes and the muffled laughter of diners drifting in from the restaurant. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Today, he had resolved to confront his manager, Greg, about the growing concerns among the staff that he had overheard the previous night. As he adjusted the collar of his waiter's uniform, he felt an unexpected surge of determination. "Greg!" Ethan called out as he stepped into the bustling kitchen. It was chaotic, with chefs barking orders and servers rushing past, but Greg was easy to spot, his arms crossed and a frown etched on his face as he surveyed the scene. "Ethan?" Greg looked momentarily puzzled. "What are you doing here? I thought you were off today." "I'm not off anymore. I need to talk to you," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his stomach. Greg raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident in his tone. "About what? You're just a waiter now, remember? I don't think you need to worry about managerial concerns." Ethan felt a flash of anger at Greg's dismissive attitude. "I'm not just a waiter. I want to know what you're doing to address the staff's concerns. I've heard rumors about layoffs, low morale." "Rumors?" Greg interrupted with a wave of his hand. "Look, every business has its ups and downs. You need to understand that the hospitality industry is tough. We can't keep everyone happy all the time." "Is that really what you believe?" Ethan challenged, stepping closer. "These are real people with families and responsibilities. They deserve transparency, not just platitudes." Greg's eyes narrowed. "Listen, Ethan, as much as I appreciate your newfound enthusiasm, you need to remember your place. You're not in a position to question me. You're just a waiter, and I suggest you stick to serving tables." The words stung, but they also ignited a fire within Ethan. He realized he might have been underestimated, but he was no longer willing to accept that. "I may be a waiter, but I'm also the owner of this hotel, and I won't stand by while my employees are treated poorly." "Owner or not, this isn't your department," Greg replied coolly. "You don't understand the complexities of running this place. Leave the management to me." Ethan clenched his fists, frustration boiling over. "You're not seeing the bigger picture. I've been too disconnected, and now I'm here to change that. I want to support the staff, not just run a business." With that, Ethan turned on his heel and strode out of the kitchen, the weight of Greg's dismissive words still pressing on him. He felt invigorated by his confrontation, yet a lingering doubt nagged at his mind. Was he really capable of making the changes he wanted to see? Gathering his resolve, Ethan headed to the staff break room. He could sense the energy in the air, a mixture of fatigue and camaraderie among the employees. They were gathered around a small table, sharing stories and laughter despite the long hours they endured. Ethan cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "Excuse me, everyone," he called out, his heart racing. "Can I have your attention for a moment?" The chatter faded, and a mix of curious expressions turned toward him. "What's going on?" One of the waitresses, Maria, asked, her expression wary. "I know I've only been here for a short time, but I want to be honest with you all," Ethan began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "I'm not just a waiter. I'm Ethan Richards, the owner of this hotel." A collective gasp swept through the room, and Ethan braced himself for their reactions. He continued, "I've seen how hard you all work, and I've heard your concerns. I want to advocate for your needs and ensure that you feel valued in this establishment." Silence hung in the air for a moment, and then Maria spoke up again, her voice filled with disbelief. "You're serious? You're the owner?" Ethan nodded, a sense of vulnerability washing over him. "Yes, I am. And I want to change how things are run around here. I want to hear your concerns directly, not just through whispers behind closed doors. Your voices matter to me." Carlos, the waiter who had initially welcomed Ethan when he first donned the uniform, stood up. "This is unexpected, but it's refreshing to hear. We've felt like we're in the dark too often, and it's good to know you care." Ethan felt a swell of hope as he observed the change in the room's atmosphere. "I do care. I want to create a workplace where everyone feels respected and valued. If there are issues, let's address them together." A waitress named Julia chimed in, her expression softening. "We've been worried about rumors of layoffs. It's been stressful for us, especially with the holidays coming up." Ethan nodded, taking mental notes. "I understand. I'll speak with Greg and make sure we have a meeting to discuss any concerns you all have. I want to create a space where you can voice your opinions freely." The conversation began to flow more easily, with employees sharing their apprehensions and frustrations. As Ethan listened intently, he felt a bond forming with his staff, something he hadn't anticipated. It was a stark contrast to the cold corporate atmosphere he had grown accustomed to. "Thank you for being honest with us, Ethan," Maria said, her voice sincere. "It's good to know someone at the top is willing to listen." "Absolutely," Carlos added. "We've been waiting for someone to step up and advocate for us. It means a lot." Ethan felt a rush of gratitude for their support. "Together, we can make this hotel a better place to work. I'm committed to ensuring that you all feel valued and appreciated." Just as the atmosphere began to shift toward optimism, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. The name flashing was one he hadn't expected to see today: Sarah, his assistant. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, stepping away from the group. He answered the call, his heart racing with anticipation. "Sarah, is everything okay?" "Ethan, we need to talk." "There's been a development regarding the hotel," she said, her tone serious. "An investigation is underway for some unethical practices." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What do you mean? What kind of practices?" "I can't discuss it all over the phone, but it's serious. You should come to the office as soon as possible," she urged. "Is it connected to the staff?" Ethan asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. "I can't say much right now, but it's possible. Just get here," she replied before hanging up. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the call pressing down on him. A sense of dread washed over him, his earlier hope dissipating like mist. He turned back to the staff, their faces filled with anticipation about his plans. But now, uncertainty loomed over him like a storm cloud. "Hey everyone," he said, his voice shaky. "I need to step out for a moment. There's some urgent business I have to attend to." As he walked away, Ethan's mind raced with questions. What could this investigation mean for his hotel? For the employees who had just begun to trust him? He felt as if the ground beneath him was shifting once again, and he had no idea where it would lead. Ethan Richards paced the plush carpet of his office, the weight of recent revelations pressing heavily on his chest. The news about the investigation had shaken the very foundation of his world. He couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in his stomach like a lead weight. The walls of his luxurious office, adorned with accolades and framed photographs of his family's successes, now felt like a prison. He glanced at his watch, the seconds ticking away with a cruel indifference. He needed to speak with Sarah immediately. She had the details that could help him navigate this storm. "Sarah!" he called out, his voice echoing off the marble walls. A moment later, his assistant entered, her expression a mixture of concern and professionalism. She had always been his anchor amidst the chaos of running a hotel empire, but today she appeared unusually tense. "Ethan, She began, but he cut her off, desperation lacing his tone. "Just tell me everything you know about the investigation. I need to understand what we're dealing with." Taking a deep breath, Sarah pulled out a folder filled with documents and reports. "The investigation is serious, Ethan. It's tied to several complaints about working conditions and financial discrepancies, but there's more." She hesitated, her eyes darting to the door as if she feared being overheard. "What is it?" Ethan pressed, the urgency in his voice growing sharper. "It seems that it's not just about the hotel. One of the complaints mentioned a family member. Someone close to you." Ethan felt his heart drop. "A family member? Who? What do you mean?" The panic was rising within him, clawing at his throat. "Your brother," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's the whistleblower." Ethan staggered back, the reality crashing down on him like a tidal wave. "No, it can't be. He's been out of my life for years. I thought he wanted nothing to do with us because of jealousy." His mind raced, piecing together fragments of their tumultuous history. The arguments, the distance, they had all seemed like a natural rift between brothers. Now, it felt like betrayal. "I'm sorry, Ethan, but the reports indicate he's been collecting evidence for a while. He claims the hotel is involved in unethical practices," Sarah explained, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Unethical practices?" Ethan echoed, his voice rising in disbelief. "I've worked tirelessly to build this hotel, to ensure it's a place of respect and luxury for both guests and staff. How could he do this?" His fists clenched at his sides, the anger and betrayal swirling within him like a storm. Sarah stepped closer, her expression softening. "You know how the industry can be, Ethan. People get desperate, and sometimes family ties can lead to unfortunate choices." Ethan's mind raced as he tried to comprehend the implications. The hotel was not just his business, it was a legacy, a dream he had nurtured since childhood. The thought of his brother, the very person he had once looked up to, turning against him, was unfathomable. "I need to confront him," Ethan declared, his jaw set with determination. "I can't let this go on without understanding his motives." "Ethan, you should be careful," Sarah cautioned, her brow furrowed with concern. "This could get messy. You'll need to tread lightly." Ignoring her warning, Ethan stormed out of his office, his mind made up. He didn't have time to consider the consequences. He was a man on a mission. He made his way through the bustling corridors of the hotel, the familiar sights and sounds now feeling foreign and oppressive. The laughter of guests, the clinking of glasses, and the shouts of waitstaff all blended into a cacophony of noise that mirrored his internal chaos. As he reached the staff break room, he found it empty except for a few scattered chairs and a half-eaten sandwich on the table. His brother, Aaron, had always been a ghost in his life, a figure who had faded into the background as their paths diverged. But today, Ethan was determined to bring that ghost into the light. "Where are you, Aaron?" he muttered under his breath as he pulled out his phone to dial his brother's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. "Of course," he sighed, frustration bubbling to the surface. "He's avoiding me." Without thinking, he decided to drive to the last known address he had for Aaron. The car ride was a blur, each passing building a reminder of the life he had built, a life Aaron had chosen to leave behind. The distance between them was not just physical, it was emotional, filled with resentment and misunderstandings. When he arrived at the small, run-down apartment complex on the outskirts of town, he felt an unexpected pang of nostalgia. This was where they had grown up, where they had shared laughter and dreams. But that was a lifetime ago. Now all that remained were bitter memories. Ethan stepped out of his car, the gravel crunching beneath his feet as he approached the building. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation ahead. As he climbed the stairs, the familiar scent of fried food wafted through the air, triggering memories of family dinners filled with laughter and warmth. He knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the stillness. After a moment, he heard shuffling inside, followed by the sound of locks clicking open. The door creaked ajar, and there stood Aaron, looking older and wearier than Ethan remembered. "Ethan," Aaron said, surprise flickering across his face. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," Ethan said, his voice firm yet laced with an undercurrent of vulnerability. "I know about the investigation. I know it's you behind it." Aaron's expression hardened, the door still partially closed, as if he were unsure whether to let Ethan in. "What do you want me to say? You've been running this place like a dictator, ignoring the people who work for you. I couldn't stay silent anymore." Ethan felt a mix of anger and sadness at his brother's words. "You think I don't care? You think I don't see the struggles? I've been trying to make things better, but it's not as easy as you think." "Better?" Aaron scoffed, finally opening the door wider. "You've built this empire on the backs of those who serve you. You don't see them, Ethan. You only see dollar signs and accolades." Ethan stepped inside, the small, cluttered apartment feeling like a world apart from the luxury he was accustomed to. "I came here to understand, Aaron. I want to know why you turned against me." "Because I thought you were better than this," Aaron exclaimed, his voice rising. "I thought you cared about family, about doing the right thing, but you've lost sight of everything that matters." Ethan's heart raced as the weight of Aaron's words crashed over him. "I've made mistakes, yes, but I've been trying to change. I've been working alongside the staff, understanding their struggles. I want to make things right." Aaron's gaze softened slightly, but skepticism lingered. "And you think confronting me will somehow fix everything? You're still part of the problem, Ethan." "I want to mend our relationship, Aaron," Ethan admitted, his voice cracking with emotion. "I want to fix the damage between us, but I can't do that if you're intent on destroying everything I've built." The silence stretched between them, thick with unresolved tension and a lifetime of hurt. Finally, Aaron spoke, his voice quieter but no less fierce. "You're right about one thing. You can't fix everything on your own. But you need to start by facing the truth about yourself and your choices." Ethan stood there, staring into his brother's eyes, and for the first time, he felt the weight of their shared history. The anger, the resentment, and the love all swirled together, creating a tumultuous storm within him. "I can't lose everything, Aaron," he whispered, his voice barely audible. He left the apartment, his heart heavy with the realization that his family's legacy was intertwined with the choices he had made and the people he had neglected. Outside, he stood at the entrance of the hotel, the luxurious facade now feeling like a mask hiding the turmoil within. Everything he had worked for, everything he held dear, was at stake. The shadows of betrayal loomed large, and he knew he had to confront not just Aaron, but the very essence of what it meant to be a leader and a brother. As he gazed at the hotel's entrance, Ethan felt a flicker of determination ignite within him. He had a chance to change the narrative, to rewrite the story of his family and his business. But it would require courage, humility, and a willingness to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. With a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward, ready to embrace the uncertain future that lay ahead. He couldn't predict what would happen next, but he was resolved to fight for his hotel, for his employees, and most importantly, for the fractured bond with his brother. Hope and fear intertwined as he prepared to confront the challenges awaiting him, knowing that redemption was possible even in the darkest of times.